Okay, looks like we are live, just doing the double check. Hello, if you can see us on the recording, I'm just doing a check to make sure the tech is working correctly. It's just taking a little bit of time. There we go. Okay, perfect. Everything is all set up. We are live. So hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you're watching this. Thanks a lot for tuning into this webinar. I'm really happy to be back here for another really exciting Kazuri Consulting webinar, this time with two great guest speakers to share their insights on the topic of curiosity. So you probably saw in the advertising for this event and all the write-up about it, the question, are you ready to get curious about curiosity? And I know it's a little bit of a cheesy question, fair enough, but that is really what we'll be talking about today, getting curious about curiosity and really lifting the lid on curiosity to understand what it means to be curious and what curiosity actually is. We're doing this because, yes, this topic is fun and it's fun to say cheesy things, but also because curiosity is really a key part of inclusion and culture, as we'll explore. And in fact, a piece of research that came out in recent years is the 6 signature traits of inclusive leadership by Deloitte, and curiosity has been defined as one of those 6 signature traits. So basically what Deloitte did was they served employees around the world, asking them when they believed that a leader was inclusive, qualify what behaviors we're talking about. What does the leader do? How do they act? How do they see the world? How do they inspire you? What do they actually mean about being inclusive? So from the results of this, they defined 6 separate traits, and curiosity is one of these 6. Being curious is linked to traits like open-mindedness, empathy, passion for learning, and many believe that because of this, it is a key enabler for success in today's global business world. Further research has shown that people who are curious make better decisions, they are more creative and more innovative as well. Curiosity can lead to lower group conflict, less confirmation bias, and more open communication. So now, to help us get curious about curiosity, let me introduce my two guests, Julie and Daniela. Julie Pham is a social scientist, organizational development leader, and author. Her book, The 7 Forms of Respect, provides guidance for transforming communication and relationships at work based on a framework about how to get curious about respect. Julie is also founder and CEO of Curiosity Based, a business that helps people strengthen communication, collaboration, and inclusion by practicing curiosity. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you
Lovely
so
to
much
have
for
you.
inviting me.
And our second panelist is Daniela Borchman. Daniela is an interculturalist dedicated to empowering people to thrive in diverse environments. As the founder of Culturists, she provides a platform for global youth to develop intercultural skills, global connections, and compassion. In her role as an intercultural relationship coach, Daniela supports and empowers individuals, couples, families, and teams to navigate the complexities of personal and professional relationships. Welcome, Daniela. Great to have you.
Hello, it's so good to be here with you too.
Now, I'm really looking forward to diving in and, yes, getting curious about curiosity. I'll try to stop saying that, but it probably will happen again. I warn everybody. So my first question to you, Julie, to start us off, referring back to the bio I just read out about practicing curiosity, which suggests that curiosity is a practice. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about what this notion is all about.
So, a lot of people think about curiosity as a trait. It's either something you have or you don't have, and it's actually very outward. I'm going to learn and accumulate new knowledge. I actually think of curiosity as a practice, and it's something that we strive to do, and yet we don't always do it. And it can be really powerful when we admit that we don't do it. And so, I think of this practice. I actually liken it to meditation. It looks very easy, yet it's quite hard to do, right? I can tell you that I try to meditate, but oftentimes it's quite hard to still the mind. And so I think of curiosity as a practice as having these 3 elements. The first is self-awareness, the second is relationship building, and the third is clear communication. So that first one, self-awareness, is practicing inward curiosity. It's actually about getting curious about myself. and why do I think what I do? The second one is relationship building, and so this is about getting curious about other people and letting them get curious about us, and that back and forth creates this reciprocity, because I don't know, there's so much more I can learn if I hear someone else's reactions to what I think. And that's the foundation of relationship building. And the third is clear communication. So this is about about listening to understand, asking questions when we don't understand, and telling specific examples and stories from our lives.
And that's great. I love how you articulate those three elements of curiosity and really the different dynamics as well, and the way that it can engage us in different ways. I'm wondering, is curiosity something from your experience that is innate of all of us? Do we all have curiosity, or do some of us need
I
to develop
do.
it
I
from
believe that.
fear?
I believe that. And I think that the environment that we're in can encourage it or can tamp it down. And so I actually specialize in curiosity at work. And so, because that's where we spend most of our waking hours, in the workplace. And so, actually, organizational leaders can decide, is this going to be a learning organization or not? Is this going to be a place where people come and just give the skills that they're already experts at, and then it feels very extractive? Or is this a place where people can continue to learn and grow and develop? And since most of us, after we graduate from school, learning can still happen, it's actually up to organizational leaders to help create that environment for that. So I think it's something innate, and something that can be difficult to practice or easier to practice depending on our environment.
Daniela, I see you nodding at a lot of what Julie's saying. I'd love to bring you in here and hear your thoughts about the innate nature of curiosity.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're sitting here connected through technology are already proof of curiosity. Like none of this would be possible if humans not would have been curious in the past and want to discover and learn new things and explore new things. So I do think it's really um, innate and essential for us as humans in general. But I also totally agree with Julie in the idea of how can curiosity be engaged or discouraged. What are elements in our environments and our cultures that help us kind of hone the skill or get a little lazy with it?
Mm-hmm. I hear what you're saying, definitely. I'm thinking it's really interesting with the work that each of you do. It's focused around curiosity. I mean, the word like curious comes into, or curious or curiosity comes into the names of both of your businesses, but you're focused on developing curiosity at different stages of your life. Daniela, your program is really about youth, whereas Julie is more about the workplace. So I'd love to hear more about the different companies that you have and that focus on how you develop curiosity at different stages of your life. Perhaps we can start with you, Daniela, talking about Culturus and what you do there.
Yes, absolutely. So culture is already in the name. It's a blend of the word culture and curious. So it's all about encouraging young people, in our case, teenagers from the age from 13 to 19, in being curious about each other's culture, learning intercultural skills that I think are so important for young people when they go up to the workplace. So hopefully they will better prepared when they get to Julie's stage, and practicing curiosity, practicing all the things that come with curiosity that you talked about: compassion, leadership, connection, all those things that are skills that have to be learned, but not a lot of people are teaching young people those skills. They are kind of just expected to be good at it, to be able to do it. So cultures really focuses on young people and the ability to develop and practice all those things.
What are some of the ways in which you enable them to develop curiosity? Is it different
Yeah.
activities, practices? What
Yeah,
kind of
so
tools do you
it's
use?
an 8 week program that we do quarterly, and each of those 8 weeks focuses on a different subject within culture. And in those modules, they have materials, information that they can see, watch, read, and then activities following up to them that they put their cultural perspective in. And then once a week, they have different groups with teenagers from all around the world where they come together and share the perspectives, share their experiences, ask questions. Sometimes we approach it in a little bit more of a playful way. And so each of those 8 weeks works around a different cultural subject in information, activities, and conversations.
Well, one thing I really enjoy about learning about the Cultures program, I mean, first the fact that it's free, so it's really accessible to so many people, but also the fact that people can do it from home. The teenagers can do it from home. So it's not about if you have access to travel, for instance, then you can meet people from different cultures, you can engage in these experiences. It's really learning about things while being immersed in your home culture and combining those two worlds in a way. So I think it's really, yeah, a lovely concept there.
Absolutely. It's the two biggest barriers for young people to have those intercultural connections and experiences are costs and limitations in travel in different ways. So we took both of those aspects out with the program to enable young people that wouldn't traditionally have the chance to have experience like this to be able to engage and connect.
And Julie, thinking about curiosity based, why did you decide to build a company around curiosity? What was it that drew you in?
So, well, first, I just have to say, I so appreciate what Daniela does, because I know my first experience of living abroad, or living outside the US, I should say, was super helpful for me and opening my eyes. And so what you're doing with teenagers, I think is just, it's so incredible, because what I end up doing is seeing at the later end, the later stages, they don't get something like that.
I think we all did.
Yeah. And really, truly, the experience of living in different cultures is, it helps so much in terms of helping people be open-minded. So in terms of why I started curiosity based, and how I figured out that it was actually about curiosity, was I was doing a lot of community building, a lot of community organizing, and what I noticed was how some people were really thriving and other people were really struggling, and because they were doing group projects together. And what I realized, the difference was, it was curiosity. And so the people who were really struggling were those who were just so focused on a particular outcome. Just, we need to get to this, and this is the plan. And those who were really thriving were just, oh my gosh, look at what we're learning. I had no idea. We've accomplished something out of nothing. And what I also saw was that in groups, if there was a critical mass of people who were curious, they could actually uplift the morale of a team. And then the inverse is true. If there are a critical mass of people who are just, this is what we need to do, and this is what success looks like, it could actually take down the morale of the team, because there are actually a lot of bystanders in groups. There are a lot of people who are just, I want to see what the dynamics are going to be, and then they will go with that. And so that's when I realized, wow, how important it is to help people practice curiosity in the workplace, because this actually affects our ability to be effective. And what I learned, so I made many mistakes. One of the things was trying to save people and trying to get them to have this good experience, the people who are so focused on an outcome. And what I learned over time was to ask a single question. And the question was this: do you think you can learn from other people here? Because this is not book learning. I'm not giving you a curriculum. The whole point of this is to be in a group where you believe that you can learn from other people around you, that they are worthy to learn from. And if you don't believe that, I can't change that for you. And so that's something that we try to actually create in the workplace, which is create a space where you're not just here to give your knowledge. You're here to learn from other people, and for them to learn from you, and for that mutual learning practice to happen. And so that's what I do.
That's wonderful. And it kind of ties into my other aspect of my work as an intercultural relationship coach that focus mostly on personal relationships. So individuals, couples, families that have an intercultural component, and the idea of being curious and wanting to learn to create a life together is a really big part. So I love how you approach this, Julie.
Yes. And especially now, the workplace is becoming so much more global. And I truly believe we belong to multiple communities, cultures, and identities all at the same time. Absolutely. And we're bringing all of that into as we work. And yet we have this very much the set idea of, the way I see the world is the way the world is. And so the practice in curiosity is to recognize, oh, maybe the way that I see it is just my way. And what are other possible ways? It's a lot of curiosity, I think, especially in the workplace, is very much about perspective taking. And this is where, so a lot of my work is around how do we practice curiosity, which assumes there's not a right or wrong answer. there's the illegal answer, or like the legal, there's like, that is against compliance. You are bullying someone. That is wrong, but and illegal. But then there's a lot of gray space in between. And I think that's where we, when we practice curiosity with one another about how other people are communicating and approaching the work, then that actually takes effort. It takes effort too, because it means, how do I accept that for me to be right doesn't mean that person has to be wrong, and for them to be right doesn't mean that I have to be wrong. We can actually be, both things can be true at the same time, and that takes a lot of mental energy, actually.
Absolutely. We talk about, especially in the cultures program, we talk about cultural lenses, like a pair of glasses that you put on, and then you see the world in a certain way. And if you can just like change glasses or be aware that people wear different glasses, you just see the world a little different in different ways. So I totally agree with that aspect of putting the work in. Diversity is great and has so many benefits and beautiful aspects, but it's hard. It's not easy. So we have to develop skills that help us. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree. I think it is so important to recognize there's never only one way of looking at something. Even if you've just been accustomed to that view for a long time, there's always more than meets the eye. And so it can be such an interesting process to just ask questions about something, try to see it from a different angle, try to discover another use for an everyday object, for instance, and see what comes out of that and start to interrogate your thoughts. I'd love to actually bring in some questions. Great that we have them coming in. Lovely to see you online. I'd like to bring in some questions tying in with the nature of curiosity and put this to both of you to answer. Question from Vincent. Would you say curiosity goes with empathy and compassion when it's about building relationships?
Julie, you want to start with that?
Yes, yes, I do. And I think that it's not just empathy and compassion with the other person, it's empathy and compassion with ourselves too. Because I think that right now, especially in our very polarized world, in this world where a lot of people aren't curious or can't practice curiosity because they're so afraid of being wrong and how other people will react to them being wrong. And so this compassion also has to have compassion with myself. It's okay that I don't know. And so if I can approach that conversation with, I don't know, then that will actually help build the relationship. Because oftentimes we, especially in the workplace, we enter thinking, I need to know, I need to be perfect here, I need to be the expert here. And that really actually hurts relationship building. So if we can enter that, then saying, I don't know, and I understand if you don't know, and how do we learn together?
Yeah, let's
goes
find
a
that
long
together.
way. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I want to add the word yet to that. I love the aspect of I don't know this yet, or I don't know how to do this yet. The idea that there's always something that we can learn, that we can explore further, I think ties in beautifully with what Julie said. And I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll actually give a specific example here because I do a lot of work around respect as well. And so I have a book called 7 Forms of Respect. And one of the big misconceptions about the book is it's training on how to be respectful. And I actually tell people, no, it's actually how to be curious about respect. And that's just a big shift for people because people hear, oh, you're going to tell me these are the 7 forms I need to do. It's like, no, actually. And I even tell people, and you may say, none of these 7 forms resonate with me. That's okay. So what does? Get curious about that. And then that means, oh, if I have certain ideas of what respect means that are rooted in my personal experience, that means other people do as well. And so how do I learn who and what in their lives have influenced how they think about respect and how that might actually be relative, which takes quite a bit of empathy and just perspective taking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like the distinction between empathy and compassion as well. Mm-hmm. They have a lot to do. They're related to each other, but they're not the same thing. But I think curiosity really is the starting point of that. Without curiosity, you can neither develop empathy nor compassion. And what Julie says, even when you think about respect and how to show respect, is so different, not just for us personally, but also culturally. That if you just approach a situation with whatever your background is, you can absolutely achieve the other thing, the opposite of what you wanted to achieve, because it's not the same thing. We're not showing, we're not understanding respect in the same way. And this is for all the different concepts, social concepts in our lives. So curiosity, I think, is really the starting point to develop empathy and to be compassionate.
Well, thinking further about that intersection between curiosity and culture, do you think that in some cultures curiosity is more innate than in others? What are your thoughts? Perhaps asking you, Daniela, from perspective working in it with intercultural relationships. Do you find that in some cultures curiosity is innate or just more celebrated, more practiced, and not so much in other cultures?
I don't think it's more innate. I do think culture shapes on what are we curious about and how we express curiosity. So maybe there are different priorities around areas of knowledge or aspects of life that are encouraged to be more curious about than other things. Educational systems, not just culture, play such a big role in if curiosity is encouraged or discouraged. And that definitely makes a big point within cultures, but also impacting long life learning habits and how do we learn at home and in school and our environments. How is curiosity perceived? Is this a good thing, or is it an annoying child that is just asking too many questions and should just memorize the right answer? So those are things that definitely are impacting curiosity. I don't think it's innate to a culture. I think it's very complex in how does cultures and systems look at the idea of curiosity, especially in young people.
Mm-hmm. I hear you, definitely. I'm wondering, Julie, if you have some thoughts as well about this.
Yeah, and Danielle, I really appreciate how you brought up the educational system, because I think that whatever educational system we came from is the best, and the other ones are not as good and not as curious, right? So I think that judgment can happen if we think that curiosity is innate in certain cultures, and that actually just reflects more of our own worldview, and just seeing, like, no, actually curiosity can look different in different places, because all of the great nations have come up with amazing work. And so I think of when I think about culture, I think of it more in terms of organizational culture and how curiosity can be fostered within organizations, and how that has a lot to do with leadership, and yet it also has to do with the people that we hire too, and all the different ways that they can actually practice curiosity. So one of the big things is actually, I think curiosity is really difficult in an organization that is constantly feeling urgency. Right. So if you have in that first element of practicing curiosity, I said is self-awareness, which requires some self-reflection. And so in companies where it's just do, deadline, and we don't have time to reflect on why we're even doing what we're doing, it can actually be pretty difficult. And that's why I also think of it the three different elements, because when I go into organizations, I ask, hey, what are your colleagues needing improvement in, and what are you needing improvement in? And so sometimes in some organizations, actually we're doing pretty well in terms of make time for self-reflection, but not in relationship building. Or we're actually pretty good at listening, but not at asking questions. I actually find that when I work with consulting companies, they can be really bad at asking questions. I'm talking about the ones with teams, consulting teams, because they're so used to, hey, talking to clients, they're trying to guide them to a particular answer and solution they can offer. And they've been in this is our methodology. This is our company's methodology. And so it's been fun to kind of work with consulting companies where they're just, wait a minute, we're not asking questions in the way that you're to truly understand. We're actually doing it to direct people. So in any case, I think with organizational culture, it takes work. It's not just saying, hey, this is one of the 6 things that you said. Tamara, you mentioned curiosity is Deloitte's list. And I see a lot of companies who put curiosity as one of their values, and yet it takes work. It takes time. You have to build it in.
Yeah, definitely relate to what you're saying. And the point of building it in, just before we started this call, I was mentioning, Julie, that I sent an email recently and got your out of office message saying that you're taking a curiosity break and that within your company, everyone is doing this. I think building in structures like that to actually take that time, slow things down and give yourself the space to engage in these processes so that we have that that ability to actually do it. I think that's so important because it won't just happen by itself. And as you say, if there are lots of deadlines, lots of competing priorities, then the chances of that creativity happening, of taking the time and space to look at things differently, it's, in my experience, it's tough to get to that.
Well, you will never find time. You have to make time. You never go, oh, here's this magical time. Look at all this extra time I just found. No, you have to make time. And so for us, every quarter, we all take a week off. We don't email each other about work things. So no one's waiting behind trying to get work done. I mean, if anyone chooses to do work, like right now, I'm choosing to be on this. I'm not asking for support from anyone else to that, so that we can actually rest, which is different, I think, from vacation.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
People can still take their vacation time, but this is time to we all rest at the same time.
I love this. I had the same reaction as Tamara when I saw the curiosity break, because as you said, it's so busy. Results, efficiency are so important. Standardization, I think, are the death of curiosity. If you have standard procedures and compliance, there's just so often no room to just wonder. I think, especially for young people, being bored is a big part of this as well, because then once you're bored, your brain just goes to other places that you usually don't think about. And a lot of young people just don't have the space to be a little bored anymore. They just have to be functioning and learn and build their resume and do extracurricular things, and not just sitting around looking in the world thinking, oh, what is this about? I think that education at home, in workplace, in relationships, has so much to do with that. And also a little bit with the embarrassment of not knowing things. People don't like the feeling of not understanding something or not being aware of something. And I think that's often has to do with then the hesitation of asking, or the hesitation of going into a conversation with the idea of I don't know something. So taking all of this out and saying it's totally okay to not know something is such a big thing as well.
Yeah, I find all too often not knowing something can be perceived as vulnerability. I love, Daniela, what you said earlier about not knowing it yet. It's true. We can find out together, we can collaborate and do all of these things. And it's not being vulnerable. Well, it is being vulnerable, admitting that we don't know it. It's not something wrong. It's just being human. We don't all know everything. Like, that's just how we work, you know? But I'd love to circle back to what you're mentioning, Julie, about organizational culture. And I think it's really interesting what you pointed out about needing to actually not have all the deadlines, for instance, having the space to make that time for curiosity, and how that can be, not having that can be a blocker in organizations. And one thing that I've noticed in my experience as well is that sometimes hierarchy and authority can be a blocker in organizational cultures. When people don't have psychological safety, for instance, don't feel they're actually able to ask questions, to find out what may be happening, to suggest things. Oh, I see it slightly differently. Could this be a possible answer as well? And that gets slammed down. So I really see that can sometimes impact the ability to be curious and the willingness to engage with those parts of ourselves.
Well, and I think that there's a difference between, I actually think I appreciate hierarchy. And part of this is actually because of my culture. I think hierarchy provides order, and it provides a clear sense of who is responsible for what. Now, then there's the abuse of hierarchy and the abuse of authority, and abuse of anything, excess of anything is harmful. And so with, and I said that hierarchy, I appreciate hierarchy because of my culture. And that's because as I'm Vietnamese, and hierarchy is embedded in our language. I am who I am in relation to you. I'm always, am I younger than you? Am I older than you? What is our relationship? That's how I will refer to myself, and that's how I will refer to the other person. So, and that is not about so much about power as it is about order. And so in an organization that thinks about hierarchy in a way of just efficiencies, and it also forces clarity, because oftentimes what people want is they just want to understand why we're doing what we're doing, which means the leader has to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't make that time for self-reflection to be clear on that. And that's actually, people aren't, sometimes what they think is the issue is the hierarchy. What they're actually rubbing, what the friction is the lack of clarity. And so I just want to distinguish between that. And then there are people who just, because I say so, and that's when you abuse, I think. That's when you're abusing your authority and you're not actually acting responsibly as a leader, because a leader needs to be able to say, I hear these things. And this is something I talk about a lot. Just because you didn't get what you want doesn't mean you weren't heard. Just because you didn't get what you want doesn't mean you weren't heard. And so it's very important in an organization to explain why we're doing what we're doing, because otherwise people will say, well, I gave my input. Why didn't we do it? And it's just something that's always going to be true, is we'll never be able to make everyone happy at the same time. So we at least need to get clear on the policy. And sometimes that requires leaders to practice that inward curiosity, because I mean, I know for me, there have been, oh, well, we should do it because I like this. And then I've had to ask myself, wait a minute. For example, information is one of the 7 forms of respect. It's something I don't personally like. And I've had to question myself on why. And then I've also had to recognize, but it's important for the organization, for my company at our stage, to do that. And so I have to set aside my personal preferences. And I had to recognize that too, and admit that to my team and say, like, this is hard for me. And yet we're doing it because of this, because it actually is what works for the team.
I think that self-awareness piece we've mentioned so many times, it is critical. And I feel like it all starts there, just understanding ourselves and then being able to be better in relation to other people and be more understanding, more empathetic, more compassionate, all of these different things. I think it really boils down to that in some ways. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to bring in more questions from the audience. We have some lovely ones coming in. Please keep them coming. So here we have a question from Abigail about being curious about other people. How can we be curious without being rude or intrusive? What are your thoughts about this?
I think that is a really important question. The idea that everybody has their boundaries, and the ideas about privacy and personal space or information. I think that is a big part of building relationships first. You're not asking somebody that you just meet for the first time the essential questions of life or their personal lives. I think building relationships, building trust is a big part of this as well. And then over time, you are able to build those aspects. So I think small talk is a really important aspect in this. Seeing how do we relate to each other? What are the things that we can connect on, and building a relationship before asking really deep questions about life or perspective or culture that very quickly can seem intrusive or rude, or something that you feel like, why are you asking me this? Especially the environment context is also really important, right? If I have a personal conversation with a friend, it's very different than a coworker next to the coffee machine. So context and relationship building are important in this.
So I have a slightly different take on this, and I appreciate all the things that you said, Daniela. I also think sometimes we've just got to take risk to build the relationship and to build the trust. And sometimes that means asking the question that might seem rude, and yet but you actually just said it. And the thing is, I think that there's too much emphasis, I think, on controlling for impact without recognizing different people are going to be impacted differently. One person's going to think that question was rude. Another person's going to think, oh, I'm glad we're getting to the real stuff, right? And we don't know. And you can meet 2 people in the same group on the same day and think like, oh, I'm so glad I don't want to talk about the weather. I don't want to talk about my vacation. I want to get to the real stuff. Another person, and this has happened to me. Literally, I start my book with sharing how I asked a very deep question of my colleagues. And then I found out that some of them later on were really deeply offended by that, but but they didn't tell me. And some were others were just like, wow, we got to the stuff. And so I think instead of trying to form the perfect question or trying to prevent ourselves from asking questions, I think what we actually need to work on more is think about, how do we answer questions? How do we actually encourage people to decline questions or try to understand the question? So before I answer, I'd really like to understand why you're asking that or why you're interested in that. Or even just saying, oh, is this what you're interested in? So for example, I think a lot of people mix up especially in the US, the difference between nationality and ethnicity. So someone will ask my nationality. I'm American, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know what they're really asking me is my ethnicity. And so I'll say, oh, are you asking me by my ethnicity? Or I'll just say, I'm Vietnamese, because I know that's that. And that gives me also permission to ask them, well, where are you from? And so that's a perfect example of actually how a question can land differently. Someone else can say, oh, that felt very othering, the question, where are you from? And for me, you're inviting me into a conversation. And so we don't know, though. And so I think that there's asking people in terms of responding to questions that may make us feel uncomfortable is, let me try to understand their question, or I have to think about that, or I just don't feel like answering that. And how do we get to that without the other person feeling, oh my gosh, I've just totally, completely wronged to this person? Because actually, when we express outrage around questions, this is what leads people to not ask questions and to also think, I should never ask that question of anyone because I had this one bad reaction one
Yeah, I
time.
think that is a really good point. The idea of how are we reacting then if somebody says, I don't think that's an appropriate question, or that is personal, I don't want to talk about this. I think that's a really interesting question to ask, not just what question are we asking, but also how do we react to the answer of that question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see the points which you're making. I think it is very important to be mindful of the boundaries that each of us has, and that perhaps a question might be comfortable for me to answer, might not be comfortable for somebody else to answer. Like, be mindful of that. And as you're saying, Julie, I think that there is always merit in being curious about each other and not being too risk averse. And I'm never going to ask a question, never going to go for it. But just how do we balance these sensitivities? And I think very interesting. Just bring on briefly this comment from Katrina here, or a question about how we remind people about curiosity in certain ways, how to not center their experiences, how to just be respectful. That's what I'm getting from this comment. How to be respectful, sensitive of lived experiences, difference between us, power dynamics in the world, and think about that as an understanding into how we are curious. And so this question that I get fairly often, actually, like, can I still be curious in terms of, I don't want to say anything that's a microaggression? And my answer is always yes, curiosity is great. It's not that there's an issue with being curious. It's just there are sensitivities. We need to be mindful of them. And how can we perhaps develop our awareness about different cultures, different backgrounds, etc., so that we can be more sensitive and, yeah, relate to each other in different ways according to
Mm-hmm.
that.
And even just saying, are you interested in hearing how that question makes me feel?
Well, yes.
Just responding with just like, or like, I want to understand the intent of your question. I think that we can have conversations actually around the questions that people ask us.
I love that, and really starting a dialogue. So they ask the question back, and really, yeah, just getting into that and showing, let's actually discuss this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about it. I love that. Always a fan of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And just bringing on here something that has come in from the comments as well, talking about what we spoke about a little while ago about looking inwards, practicing curiosity. Thank you, Pedro, for your remarks about that. And now I'd like to go to another question from Vincent, which ties in with something that we were discussing, the three of us, beforehand. This very often used saying about how curiosity killed the cat. While preparing for this, I was thinking, is there perhaps a dark side to curiosity? Is that a thing? Is it maybe just what I talked about with psychological safety, not feeling safe to actually ask questions, to express my point of view? Is there something that can be negative about being curious? Is it, or maybe it's just about sometimes we learn things we don't want to know, and so we're sometimes advised by people around us to be cautious because ignorance is bliss in some ways. So what is your take, both of you, about, yeah, is there a dark side to curiosity? Is there anything that we need to steer away from? Does curiosity kill the cat? Happy to hear your thoughts.
You want to start this off, Julie?
Whatever question you ask, you have to be ready to hear the answer and be surprised by whatever that answer is. And actually, what we were talking about practicing curiosity, inward curiosity, is sometimes I'll ask a question, I'm surprised by the answer, and then I also have to think about my own reaction to that. Am I disappointed? Am I confused? Am I what is that? I don't think that there is I actually don't think that there is a dark side unless someone has dark intentions. So, and I also, I just tend to operate from I try to be optimistic of just, well, I think that people are trying to learn. And I actually want to be really clear. I don't think it's about having good intentions or bad intentions. It's actually about understanding what the intention is. So rather than saying this is good or bad, it's just what is their intention. Sometimes we don't even know what our intentions are when we say things. And this is sometimes we can feel, sometimes if I don't want to answer a question and I'm feeling outraged, it might be because I don't know the answer. And I'm like upset because I don't know the answer. But what it's coming off as is like, I can't believe you asked me that question. So in any case, all of this is like, there's this reflection that happens with curiosity. That's also, it invites us for an opportunity to practice inward curiosity with whatever question we're wanting to ask or answering.
Yeah, I think there are different ways to look at this. I think one point kind of relates back to just the last question, the fear of somehow infringing other people's privacies or personal space as kind of a risk of curiosity. And I really liked Julie's take of this, of you can ask any question, you might not always get every answer to it, and you have to be prepared for that as well and keep the conversation going in different ways around this. There are also ways of thinking about just maybe smaller children curiosity and risky behavior just to find something out, touching the hot plate on the stove, or trying what happens if you stick something into the power outlet. Those are, of course, ways of curiosity where you have to also maybe as an adult listen to your intuition. There are ways of where you feel like, is this the right space to be in? I'm very curious about this, but do I feel like this might also have some other element to it? So I think the balance of intuition and curiosity is an interesting question that we can look into this. And maybe in the workplace, Julie, I'm interested to hear your take on the idea of curiosity also being distraction. We talked a little bit about different emphasis on efficiency, but how does curiosity maybe lead to distractions in the team? What are the fears of leadership around that?
Yes, and I think that there's just different stages to the work. Hey, are we in ideation? Are we in production? Are we in review? Right? And kind of understanding there are times to bring up certain things. And so, I mean, I remember I worked at a company where there was all the ideation and everyone had a chance to ideate and ask questions. And then we would get into operations. And then there'd be some big leader who hadn't read the earlier emails and now was just, well, why this? Why this? Why this? And this caused all this fear in people. Because it was like, well, we had the time. Why didn't you do it then? And now you are exerting your authority. And they felt like they couldn't push back. Right. And so I think that's actually not being aware of the context of when, and then there's review, which is, this is the quality assurance part, right? She's like, oh, now we have to see, hey, I see something a little off. This is also an appropriate time to ask questions too. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's the time to question and to be open and to ask why. And this also requires, were you listening when we were having those conversations earlier? Because if you weren't, then you weren't doing your part practicing curiosity then. So
yeah, I kind of coming back to hierarchy and the aspect that you talked about earlier, that hierarchy is also important if used well, leadership used well. And I think in culture that has a big part to do, especially when we're coming to your curiosity as well, cultures that tend to be a little bit more hierarchical, and especially young people, coming from an experience working with teenagers, often having the feeling of they are not being taken serious, they cannot express questions or other opinions around, especially their elders or people of authority, teachers, bosses. I do think there's an element of then good leadership and using hierarchy in the right way. So whoever is lower in the hierarchy, whatever the hierarchy is, age and gender, whatever that might be, is able to still live out this curiosity and benefit the family, the organization, the social unit, whatever we're talking about through that.
Got a thought up here from Peju, just talking about the Cultures program. So I'd love to hear more about how to get on the course. Well, I'm going to direct a question to each of you to round it off, and I'll put up the links so you can get in touch with the speakers after the call to be able to see where their websites are, how to get in touch. So if that answers your question, Peju. So now perhaps our final question, because the time always goes so quickly, our final question to each of you is a personal one, asking where your curiosity stems from and what about the world makes you curious?
You want me to start, Julie?
Go
I
ahead.
think for me, it's really people. People make me so curious. I love people. I love connect with people, learning about their experience, their perspective, their opinions, their life. So every time I'm able to meet somebody, especially somebody that is very different from myself, that makes me super curious and I immediately want to engage and learn more. So I think that's my general answer. People make me curious.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'd ask people where it stemmed from. My family has a Vietnamese newspaper, so I think even in just that journalism part and working with people and just how much learning can happen from talking to different people and knowing that different views will contribute to the story. That there's not one story, that I need to collect different opinions. And I'll say one of the things that I love in terms of just inspiring curiosity is reading fiction. I'm a huge fiction reader. Historical fiction is actually my favorite genre. So
Totally agree there. That is one of the things that I use very often to spark my curiosity and satisfy that longing to live, to hear about how other people live, what they think about, how they do things. I'm fascinated just learning about different people. And I find novels, films, documentaries are so useful for that. Just tuning into things like building empathy, understanding different experiences. And so, yeah, totally rate that as well. Lovely. Well, it's been a fascinating 45 minutes together. The time always goes so quickly, but thank you both so much for your insights, for the warmth you brought to the conversation, all these different things. And thank you to everybody who is watching wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as I said at the beginning. Thank you all for tuning in, whether you're live, listening to the recording. Great to have you here. So just want to put this link on screen. If you're interested in hearing about more events like this and also getting a monthly dose of insights about inclusion, please go to my website, kazuriconsulting.com, and you can subscribe to my newsletter. It goes out once a month and it contains information about events going on, insights, short posts that you can read, things like this to really help you to fuel your inclusion journey and discover all the great things out there about DE&I. So thank you very much to Julie and to Daniela for coming this afternoon. And thank you to everyone for watching. Hope to see you again soon in September. I'll be back with the first virtual webinar of my series, Intersectional Women, which is a series that looks at womanhood in its different guises, the things that bring us together and the things that separate us and create different experiences on account of our different backgrounds and realities. So we've done a number of in-person events. The next one will be in September online. I'll be releasing details soon. So yes, check the newsletter. So check on LinkedIn. And it'll be great to see you again then. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
thank you.